Wonder of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 18, Part 5. He had traversed probably half the distance he had come when the burrowed Jenny halted to shoot up her long ears. Something moving had attracted her attention, but Adam could not see it. He drove her on, and again she stopped. Adam could now see the shack, and as he peered sharply there seemed to cross his vision a bounding gray object. He rubbed his eyes and muttered. Perhaps the heat had affected his sight. Then between him and the shack flashed a rough object, gray-white in color, and it had the bounding motion of a jackrabbit. But it could not have been a rabbit because it was too large, and besides, there were none in the valley. A wildcat, perhaps? Adam urged Jenny on, and it struck him that she was acting queerly. This burro never grew contrary without a cause. When she squealed and sheered off to one side, Adam knew something was amiss. That vague shock returned to his consciousness, stronger, more certain and bewildering. Halting so as to hear better, he held his breath and listened. Crack and roll of rocks, slow sliding rattle, crack. The mystery of the bounding gray objects was solved. Veery had again taken to the rolling rocks down the slope. Adam broke into a run. He was quite a distance from the shack, though now he could see it plainly. Nobody was in sight. More than once, as he looked, he saw rocks bound high above the brush and fall to puff up dust. Veery was industrious this morning, making up for the lost time, taking sure advantage of Adam's absence. Adam ran faster. He reached a point opposite the fan-like edge of the great slant of loose stones, and here he seemed to get into a zone of concatenated sound. The wind created by his run filled his ears, and his sight, too, seemed not to be trusted. Did it not magnify a bounding rock and puff of dust into many rocks and many puffs? Streaks were running low down in the brush, raising little dusty streams. He saw clumps of brush shake and bend. If something queer such as had affected Jenny did not possess his sight and mind, then it surely possessed Death Valley. For something was wrong. Suddenly Adam's ears were deafened by a splitting shock. He plunged in his giant stride, slowed and halted. He heard the last of a sliding roar. The avalanche had slipped, but it had stopped. Bounding rocks hurtled in front of Adam, behind him. The puffs and streaks of dust were everywhere. He heard the whiz and thud of a rolling rock passing close behind him. As he gazed, a large stone bounded from the ground and seemed to pass right through the shack. The shack collapsed. Adam's heart leaped to his throat. He was riveted to the spot. Then mercifully, it seemed, a white form glided out from the sun's shelter. It was the woman, still unharmed. The sight unclamped Adam's voice and muscle. "Go across, hurry!" yelled Adam with all the power of his lungs. He measured the distance between him and her, 200 yards. Rocks were hurtling and pounding across that space. The woman heard him. She waved her white hand, and it seemed she was waving him back out of peril. Then she pointed up the slope. Adam wheeled. What a thrilling sight. Rocks were streaking down, hurtling into the air, falling to cracked powder from the other rocks that likewise were set in motion. Far up the long gray slope with its million facets of stones shining in the sunlight appeared Veery, working frantically. No longer did he seek to frighten his wife, he meant to kill her. His insane genius had read the secret of the slope, and in an instant he would have the avalanche in motion. The cracking clamor increased. Adam opened his lips to yell a terrible threat up at Veery, but a whizzing boulder large as a bucket, flashing within a foot of his head, awakened him to his own peril. He saw other rocks bounding down in line with him, and changing his position, stepping, leaping, dodging, he managed to evade them. He had no fear for himself, but terror for the woman and for Veery's deadly rage possessed his heart. Then a piercing split as of rocks rent asunder. A rattling crash, and the lower half of the great gray slope was in motion. The avalanche. Adam leaped at the startling sound, and bounding a few yards to a huge boulder high as his head, and higher he mounted it. There, unmindful of himself, he wheeled to look for Magdalene Veery. It was too late to reach her. She faced that avalanche, arms spread aloft, every line of her body instinct with the magnificent spirit which had been her doom. "Run, run, run!" shrieked Adam wildly. But lost was his piercing shriek in the swallowing, gathering might of the crashing roar of the avalanche. A pall of dust, a gray tumbling mass, moved down ponderously, majestically, to hide from Adam's sight the white form of Magdalene Veery. It spread to where Adam stood, enveloped him, and then, in boom and thunder and crashes of falling worlds, the boulder was lifted and carried along with the avalanche. End of chapter 18.